That night, I decided it was time to put an end to the uncertainty, not because I was ready for it, but because I could no longer bear the lies. It all started with small changes, things that seemed insignificant at first. Emily, my wife, began staying late at work, even though she used to be home like clockwork. Suddenly, there were these new friends I'd never heard of before, who somehow became the center of her social life overnight. But what struck me the most was her eyes. They had changed. There was a coldness in her gaze, an emotional distance I couldn't ignore. Whenever I asked her about her day, her answers were vague, rushed, like she couldn't wait to end the conversation. And then there was her phone. She guarded it like it held state secrets, clutching it tightly, always face down on the table. I didn't need to be a genius to realize something was wrong. I tried convincing myself it was all in my head. I told myself I was overthinking, being paranoid. But the feeling gnawed at me relentlessly, day and night. Every smile she gave me felt forced, every kiss mechanical. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but a part of me was terrified of what I might find. It wasn't until that fateful Friday night that everything came crashing down. Emily told me she was going to meet some friends for dinner. Her tone was casual, almost rehearsed, and as she kissed me goodbye, I noticed she avoided my eyes. The second the door shut behind her, I knew something wasn't right. I waited for a while before pulling up the tracking app we both installed on our phones years ago for safety reasons. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the screen, as if pressing it would make everything real. When I finally did, my heart sank. She wasn't at the restaurant she mentioned. Instead, her location showed she was across town, at a bar notorious for its dim lighting and private booths. My mind raced, each thought more unbearable than the last. Was she meeting someone? Who was it? My hands trembled as I stared at her location, the small red taunting me with its betrayal. But instead of driving over there and confronting her, I chose a different path, one that would make her remember this night forever. I went to the drawer in our bedroom and pulled out the engagement ring I'd given her years ago, a symbol of trust, love, and commitment. Now a cruel joke? I placed it in a small box and attached a note, one that simply read, "I hope he's worth it." And then, with deliberate calm, I called a courier service. I gave them the address of the bar and requested they deliver the package to Emily directly. The courier didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any explanations. As I hung up, a wave of adrenaline surged through me. I wasn't sure if I was furious, heartbroken, or just numb. And that's when I sat down, alone in the empty house, and waited. What happened next would change my life forever. As I sat there, the seconds stretched into minutes, and the minutes into hours. My mind was racing with possibilities. Would she open the box in front of him? Would she deny everything? Would she even come home? I didn't know what to expect, but I knew one thing for sure. The truth was finally out of my hands. The silence of the house felt oppressive, like a weight pressing down on my chest. Every creak of the floorboards, every passing car outside, made my heart leap. I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for something, anything, that would break the stillness. Then, finally, it came. A single text message popped up on my screen. It was from Emily. "What is this? Why would you do this? Call me." Her words were frantic, as though she was trying to regain control of the situation. I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I imagined her sitting in that bar, her lover by her side, as she opened the box and read my note. I could almost hear the sharp intake of breath, see the way her face flushed with a mix of shock and shame, or maybe just anger. Moments later, my phone began to buzz with an incoming call. Her name lit up on the screen. For a brief second, I considered answering. I wanted to hear her explanation, her excuses, her lies. But something inside me held back. Instead, I let it ring until it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I knew she'd be furious, confused, maybe even scared. But I didn't care anymore. The weight of my suspicion, the sleepless nights, the constant second-guessing, it was all gone now. I had exposed her, and there was no going back. Another call came through. This time, it wasn't Emily. It was an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Is this Jason?" a male voice asked. It was calm, almost smug. "Who's asking?" I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "This is Mark. I believe you sent something to Emily tonight. Let's talk about this like adults." Mark. So this was the man she had been sneaking around with. Hearing his voice made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay composed. "There's nothing to talk about," I said coldly. "You've already made your choices. Now deal with the consequences." He chuckled, a low, condescending sound that made my skin crawl. "You think sending a little box changes anything? Emily and I are happy together. You're just—" I hung up before he could finish. I wasn't going to let him have the satisfaction of getting under my skin. But the night wasn't over yet. Moments later, I heard the sound of tires screeching outside. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain just enough to see Emily's car pulling into the driveway. She got out, slamming the door behind her, and stormed toward the house. When the front door flew open, she stood there, her face flushed and her eyes blazing with fury. She was holding the small box in one hand, the engagement ring glinting under the dim light of the hallway. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. I stood there, silent, letting her words hang in the air. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to confront her. "You tell me," I finally said, my voice calm but firm. "What does that ring mean to you now? What does our marriage mean to you?" She faltered for a moment, her expression shifting from anger to something closer to panic. But then she recovered, her tone turning defensive. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "Mark is just a friend. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Am I?" I asked, taking a step closer to her. "Because I don't think friends meet in bars and hide it from their spouses. I don't think friends laugh behind their husband's back." Her face paled, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. But instead of breaking down, she lashed out. "You're acting like a crazy person, spying on me, sending me this message in public. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" "Good," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "Because now you know exactly how I felt every time you lied to me. Every time you looked me in the eyes and pretended everything was fine." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. But there was nothing she could say that would make this better. And then, in a moment that I'll never forget, she said the words that sealed her fate. "You're pathetic, Jason. I deserve better than this. Better than you." Her words hung in the air, cutting through me like a knife. But instead of breaking me, they only made me stronger. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and said, "Then go. Pack your things and leave. Because after tonight, you'll never have to settle for me again." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. But this was far from the end. What happened next would take everything I thought I knew about betrayal and push it to a level I never imagined. I walked upstairs, leaving her standing frozen in the hallway. I needed space, distance from the venom she'd just spit at me. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but oddly, I felt a strange clarity amidst the chaos. Her words, as cutting as they were, gave me the final push I needed. There was no repairing this. There was no coming back. I closed the bedroom door behind me, leaning against it for a moment to steady myself. Then, I grabbed my laptop from the nightstand. If she wanted to call me pathetic, I'd show her just how meticulous and methodical I could be. Over the past few weeks, as my suspicions about Emily grew, I had quietly started gathering evidence. Phone records, credit card statements, odd patterns in her schedule. It all pointed to one conclusion, but I had needed proof. Now, it was time to piece it all together. I pulled up her phone records first. The same unknown number had appeared repeatedly over the last few months. Dozens of calls and texts at all hours. Mark. It had to be him. I'd seen enough. Next, I opened her email account, which she had carelessly left logged in on our shared laptop. My hands trembled as I clicked through her inbox, scanning for anything that would confirm what I already knew. And then I found it. An email from him, sent just 2 days ago. The subject line read, "Can't wait to see you Friday night." My stomach churned as I opened it. The email was sickeningly casual, filled with inside jokes and flirty comments. He had even included a picture of the two of them together, sitting at the same bar where she had been tonight. Her smile in the photo was radiant, the kind of smile I hadn't seen her wear around me in months. But the kicker was the last line of his email. Soon, we won't have to hide anymore. Just tell him and get it over with. I love you. My vision blurred as I stared at those words. I had always thought love was unbreakable, a bond that could withstand anything. But now, staring at this undeniable proof of her betrayal, I realized how fragile it really was. A sudden knock on the bedroom door jolted me back to reality. Jason, open the door, Emily called, her voice strained. Let's talk about this. Talk? After everything I had just seen? I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and opened the door. She was standing there, her face flushed, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. But the second she saw the laptop in my hand, her expression shifted. What are you doing? She asked, her voice laced with panic. Looking for the truth, I replied, my tone flat. And I found it. Her eyes widened. You went through my emails? That's a violation of my privacy. Privacy? I snapped, my voice rising. You're worried about privacy after you've been sneaking around with him for months? After you've lied to me every single day? She took a step back, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For once, she had no excuse, no clever lie to twist the situation in her favor. I didn't mean for it to happen, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. It just did. That's your explanation? I asked, incredulous. It just happened? You expect me to believe you accidentally fell into his arms, into his bed? Tears streamed down her face now, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. You said I'm pathetic, I continued, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Maybe I was. Maybe I let you walk all over me for too long. But not anymore. I handed her the laptop, the email still open on the screen. She glanced at it, her face crumpling as she read the damning evidence. Jason, please, she begged, her voice trembling. Let's talk about this. We can fix it. I'll end things with him, I promise. End things with him? I laughed bitterly. Emily, it's already over. Not just with him. With us. She sank to the floor, sobbing, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Her tears were too little, too late. As I turned to leave the room, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. This time, it wasn't just a message. It was a video. Curious and cautious, I opened it. The screen filled with grainy footage of Emily and Mark at the bar. But it wasn't just the two of them. There was someone else, another man sitting at the bar, filming them. The video ended with a text overlay. There's more you need to see. Call me. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Who had sent this? And what was their angle? As Emily's sobs echoed through the house, I realized this was far from over. The web of lies was more tangled than I had ever imagined, and the truth was only beginning to unravel. I stared at the video on my phone, unable to process what I had just seen. Emily's betrayal was bad enough, but now there was someone else involved, a stranger who seemed to know everything and wanted to share it with me. My mind raced with questions. Who was this person? What did they know? And why were they reaching out to me? Emily was still sitting on the floor, crying, but her sobs faded into the background as I focused on the text overlay. There's more you need to see. Call me. I hesitated for a moment before tapping the number. My hands trembled as the line rang. On the third ring, a deep, steady voice answered. Jason, I'm glad you called, the man said. He sounded calm, almost professional. Who is this? I demanded. And how do you know about Emily? Let's just say I'm someone who's been watching for a while, he replied cryptically. You deserve to know the whole truth. Watching? I snapped. What does that mean? Are you stalking her? It's not what you think, he said quickly. I'm a private investigator. Someone hired me to follow Mark, and, well, Emily got caught in the crossfire. A private investigator? My stomach twisted. Who hired you? And why? That's not something I can disclose, he said, his tone firm. But I can tell you this. Mark isn't who you think he is. He's dangerous, Jason. And Emily, she's in way over her head. I blinked, trying to make sense of his words. Dangerous? Mark? The smug, cocky guy who called me earlier didn't exactly scream threat. What do you mean by dangerous? I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. Mark has a history, the man explained. A long one. He's a professional con artist. He targets women, married women, specifically. He gains their trust, isolates them, and then bleeds them dry. Your wife isn't the first, and she won't be the last. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was being played. Why are you telling me this? I asked, still struggling to process everything. Because I've seen how this ends, he said grimly. Mark will take everything from her. Her money, her reputation, even her safety. If you care about her, you need to act now. I let out a bitter laugh. Care about her? She's been lying to me for months, sneaking around with this guy, and now you expect me to swoop in and save her? I get it, the investigator said, his voice softening. You're angry, and you have every right to be. But this isn't just about Emily. It's about you, too. Mark is methodical. If he knows you're onto him, he'll come after you. Your finances, your name, everything. The room seemed to spin as his words sank in. This wasn't just a marital betrayal. It was something much bigger, something darker. What do you want me to do? I asked finally. I'm sending you everything I've gathered on Mark, he said. Photos, financial records, past victims' testimonies, it's all in there. Use it however you see fit. But whatever you do, don't confront him directly. He's dangerous when cornered. Before I could respond, the call ended. A second later, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was a link to a secure folder. I opened it cautiously, my hands trembling. The folder was filled with documents, photos, and videos, all damning evidence against Mark. There were pictures of him with other women, financial statements showing large sums of money being funneled into offshore accounts, and even police reports from past victims. One photo in particular caught my attention. It was of Emily and Mark, taken outside the bar where she had been earlier that night. They were laughing, holding hands, looking every bit the happy couple. My stomach churned at the sight, but I forced myself to keep scrolling. The more I read, the more my anger shifted from Emily to Mark. He wasn't just some guy she had an affair with. He was a predator, and she was his prey. As much as I hated what Emily had done, I couldn't ignore the fact that she was in real danger. And if Mark was as ruthless as the investigator claimed, then so was I. I closed the folder and took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about survival. Emily's sobs had quieted by now, and I could hear her moving around downstairs. I walked out of the bedroom and found her in the living room, pacing back and forth. When she saw me, her eyes were red and puffy, but there was a flicker of defiance in her expression. Jason, we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling. Oh, we're going to talk, I said, holding up my phone. But first, you need to see this. I handed her the phone, the folder still open. She hesitated for a moment before taking it, her eyes scanning the screen. As she scrolled through the files, her face went pale. Where did you get this? She whispered. Does it matter? I replied. What matters is that the guy you've been sneaking around with is a con artist. He's been using you, Emily, just like he's used every other woman before you. She sank onto the couch, her hands shaking as she held the phone. I didn't know, she stammered. I thought he cared about me. Cared about you? I said, my voice rising. Emily, he's been playing you from the start. And now, because of you, he's got his sights set on me, too. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let her off the hook. You need to tell me everything, I said firmly. How you met him, what he's said to you, everything. Because if we're going to stop this guy, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. She nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping in defeat. For the first time in months, I saw the woman I had married. The one who looked at me with something resembling remorse. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The storm was just beginning, and I had no idea how much destruction it would leave in its wake. Emily sat on the couch, clutching my phone as though it might shatter in her hands. Her face was pale, her lips trembling, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. It wasn't just guilt anymore, it was terror. She finally understood the gravity of what she'd gotten herself into. Talk, I said, my voice low and steady. Start from the beginning. How did this happen? She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. I met him at a work event. He was charming, confident. He listened to me, Jason. He made me feel important. I scoffed, the bitterness creeping into my tone. So that's all it took? Some sweet-talking stranger, and you threw everything we had away? It wasn't like that, she insisted, tears streaming down her face. At first, it was just innocent. He said all the right things, made me feel like I mattered. And then it just escalated. Escalated how? I pressed. She hesitated, looking down at the floor. We started meeting after work. For drinks, at first. Then, other places. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Jason. I swear. I shook my head, disgusted. You didn't mean for it to go this far? Emily, you were planning to leave me for him. Don't act like this was some accident. She looked up at me, her expression desperate. I didn't know who he really was. I thought he loved me. You thought he loved you? I repeated, my voice rising. Emily, he's a professional liar. He's done this to countless women before you. And now, thanks to you, he's dragged both of us into his mess. Her shoulders sagged as the weight of my words sank in. What do we do now? She asked, her voice trembling. We. I laughed bitterly. There's no we, Emily. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it. She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. My sympathy for her had run dry. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that Mark was a threat, not just to her, but to me as well. I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my emotions. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to cut all contact with him. No calls, no texts, nothing. Do you understand me? She nodded, her hands still trembling. And you're going to tell me everything he said to you. Every promise, every lie, every detail. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. She hesitated for a moment, then began to speak, her voice shaky but determined. He said he wanted to start a new life with me, that he'd take care of everything, but I had to be all in. He asked me to transfer some of our savings to an account he set up. I didn't do it, Jason. I swear. My blood ran cold. You didn't transfer anything? No, she said quickly. I was going to, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I knew it was wrong. For the first time that night, I felt a small glimmer of relief. At least she hadn't handed over our money, yet. Did he say anything else? Anything about me? I asked. She nodded, her face paling further. He said you'd never figure it out, that if you tried to stop us, he'd handle it. Handle it? I repeated, my voice icy. What does that mean, Emily? Was he threatening me? I don't know, she said, shaking her head. Maybe. He never said it outright, but the way he talked about you, it scared me, Jason. I clenched my fists, the anger boiling inside me. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. Mark was a predator, and he had made the mistake of underestimating me. Fine, I said, my voice cold and steady. If he wants a fight, he's going to get one. But we're going to do this my way. Emily looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. What are you going to do? I didn't answer her. I didn't have to. Deep down, I already knew my next move. The following morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Mark thought he had the upper hand, but he didn't know who he was dealing with. If he was as calculated as the private investigator claimed, then I needed to be just as ruthless. Emily was quiet, avoiding me as I moved through the house, making phone calls and scribbling notes. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer explanations. She had already caused enough damage. Now, it was up to me to clean up the mess. The first call I made was to the private investigator. He answered on the second ring. I need your help, I said without preamble. Figured you might, he replied. What's the plan? I want to set a trap, I said. Something that will expose him for who he really is. The investigator paused for a moment before responding. That's risky. If Mark catches wind of what you're doing, he won't hesitate to retaliate. I don't care, I said firmly. I'm done playing it safe. Over the next few hours, we devised a plan. It was simple, but effective. I would play the role of the naive husband, reaching out to Mark under the guise of wanting to make peace. Meanwhile, the investigator would gather additional evidence to ensure we had everything we needed to take him down. By the time the plan was set, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Mark had been playing games with my life, but now the tables were about to turn. As I sat down to draft the message I would send to Mark, Emily walked into the room. "Jason," she said quietly, I just want to say I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't look up. "It's too late for that, Emily." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know, but I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Just tell me what you need me to do." I hesitated for a moment, then looked at her. "If you really want to help, you'll stay out of my way. Let me handle this." She nodded again, her expression solemn. For the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of sincerity in her eyes. But I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. As I hit send on the message to Mark, a cold determination settled over me. This wasn't about saving my marriage anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and making sure Mark paid for every lie, every manipulation, and every moment of pain he had caused. Little did I know, the storm I was about to unleash would change everything. Mark responded to my message within the hour. His tone was smug and dismissive, exactly as I expected. He acted like he had already won, like I was some desperate man grasping at straws. "Jason, I appreciate you reaching out. I think it's best if we clear the air. Let me know when and where you'd like to meet." I stared at the message, feeling my pulse steady. He thought he was in control, but he had no idea what was coming. I replied, "Let's meet at the bar on 5th Avenue. Tonight at 8 p.m. Just you and me." The investigator had already arranged for discreet surveillance at the bar. Every word, every move, everything Mark said would be recorded. The hours leading up to the meeting dragged on. Emily lingered around the house, clearly wanting to talk, but I had nothing to say to her. She had already made her choices. At 7:30, I grabbed my jacket and keys. Emily stood in the doorway, her expression hesitant. "Jason, be careful," she said softly. "I'll be fine," I replied before walking out. The bar was dimly lit, filled with chatter and clinking glasses. The investigator sat at a corner table, subtly adjusting his recording device. I spotted Mark in the back, already seated, a self-assured grin on his face. As I approached, he extended a hand. "Jason, good to see you, man." I ignored his hand and took a seat. "Let's keep this simple," I said. "You've been lying to Emily, and you've been targeting other women before her. You think you're untouchable, but I know exactly who you are." Mark smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You're overreacting. Emily made her own choices. Maybe you should ask yourself why she was looking for something more." I kept my expression neutral. "And what about the others? The ones before her?" His smirk faltered slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and opened a folder. "These women do." I turned the screen toward him. Photos, financial transactions, police reports, it was all there. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He glanced around the bar as if searching for an escape. "You should be careful, Jason," he said, lowering his voice. "You don't want to get involved in something you don't understand." "I understand plenty," I replied. "And I also understand that people like you thrive on deception. But it's over, Mark. The authorities already have this. If I were you, I'd start thinking about what comes next." For a brief moment, he said nothing. Then, instead of lashing out, he chuckled. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you don't know the half of it." He stood up, straightening his jacket. "This conversation is over." "Yeah," I said, watching him walk away. "It is." I glanced toward the investigator, who gave me a small nod. Everything had been recorded. Now, it was only a matter of time. 2 days later, I got a call from the investigator. "They've got him," he said. "Already?" I asked, surprised. "He got sloppy," he explained. "Authorities flagged some of his financial activity. They arrested him at his apartment this morning." I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything settle. Mark was finally out of our lives. Emily, on the other hand, was a wreck. She spent most of her time in the guest room, barely speaking. One evening, she finally broke the silence. "Jason," she said quietly, "I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know how sorry I am." I studied her for a moment before answering. "I appreciate that, Emily, but sorry doesn't change what happened." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I understand. I just, I hope one day you can move past this." "I already have," I said simply. The next few weeks were filled with paperwork and legal proceedings. Mark's arrest became public news, and Emily's involvement, though not criminal, drew attention. She eventually decided to move to another city to start over. One evening, I found myself at the same bar where I had confronted Mark. As I sipped my drink, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I had faced betrayal, manipulation, and lies, but I had come out the other side stronger. Mark was gone. Emily was no longer my concern, and for the first time in a long time, my life was truly my own, and that was all I needed.